Sup, Bo here again. And then in this entry, I want to talk about emotions. Because I've been using the terms energy and sensitivity in my past videos. But really, a big, massive proportion of energy is to do with emotion. So, you have like sensations in the body, but like, it's all linked to how you're feeling emotionally. And so I want to introduce emotions, right? And you're like, what's there to introduce? Like, you're angry, you're happy, you're sad. Like, there's not much more to it, right? But really, like, if I were to ask you what are emotions, then a lot of you would be like, they're just a biological phenomenon, right? But then I'm like, so what role do they play in, like, evolution, just biology? Well, this is where it starts getting a bit tricky, right? It's like the same as if I asked you, like, what is consciousness from a scientific perspective, right? It gets a bit tricky. But basically, right, emotions, they are a guidance system, right? Your emotions are meant to be a guidance system. So, what this means is, they're not just a phenomenon that is just a byproduct or anything like that. They actually serve a purpose, which is basically to guide us. And yeah, I mean, isn't very, like, it's not, I'm probably not convincing you, like, of anything in particular right now, because, well, they're meant to basically keep us alive. That's like a very kind of Darwinian way of explaining emotion. But really, emotions, they're a guidance system. And, if I was to really go kind of into spiritual territory, emotions are basically the connection between the higher self and the physical self, so your individual ego self. And I'm not going to go into too much detail in this particular entry about this, because that's going a bit too complex. But essentially, our emotions are there to be trusted, right? And basically, I mentioned in the Logic of the Emotion entry about how I mentioned this a quote, which is that the mind is a brilliant servant but a terrible master. Well, this kind of ties into what I'm trying to explain, is that emotions, they are the guide. Like, they are what guide you throughout life. And the mind is meant to facilitate that, right? Because, like, another thing that I said before was that your core motivations are emotional. Like, behind the thing that you think is a logical, like, reason for doing something is actually an emotional, an emotional reason for, like, wanting to do that thing. Like, either you want to, generally it's you're trying to basically make things better for yourself. You're trying to feel not as bad. Like, you're trying to escape some kind of negative feeling or, like, association or trauma or something like that. But that's what it boils down to, like, you can kind of argue that as much as you want, but when you really kind of delve deep and you exercise your discernment, you kind of piece things together, you realize that emotions are basically what are guiding you ultimately in life, not logic. Logic is there to be the administrator, like the servant. And, a lot of people think that logic is king. I'm looking at you scientists. And, it's very good at what it does, logic. And it's something that, like, no other species that we know of can do, right? Kind of linearly piecing things together in like, a very coherent fashion. And, being able to manipulate things, like, in control variables and stuff like that. But ultimately, logic, our minds, is the servant. And so, okay, so let me expand a bit about emotions. your emotions exist on a scale. Because, like, yeah, we tend to think of emotions as like just these one-off things that happen. You know, it's like kind of, oh, I'm angry now. Okay, that's gone. Okay, now I'm happy, and then like now I'm sad. And like we think of emotions as this kind of, as these kind of discrete states that happen to us. And in reality, emotions exist on a continuous scale. So they're all related. And basically the parameter on the scale is like vibration. So this is the link between energy and emotion, right? Energy, right, there is energy of varying kind of intensity, right? And you could link that, you know, there's, what is it, speed equals frequency over wavelength. I think it's something like that. And then that is then related to energy, and in some way, like speed is related to energy. Is it E equals mc squared? No, I don't know. I'm kind of like, I'd have to think through that. But basically, in the same way that energy, you know, like the energy you perceive, like for example, like of the energy of electricity. If you turn up the voltage, or if you turn up the current, or if you decrease the resistance, then like the power output of that circuit will increase. And that's how energy works, right? It's a universal principle. It's not just kind of how we feel. How we feel is a manifestation of this universal principle of energy. You know, everything is energy. And so our emotions are synonymous in terms of like the way they're manifested. They exist on a continuous scale. So basically it starts off, and there's a very good chart that basically puts all of these emotions on like a scale. It's actually in spirals, but I'll link that in the description below so you can check that out. But basically they exist on a scale from like lowest energy, lowest vibration, to highest vibration or highest frequency. And all of the negative emotions exist at the bottom of the scale. So like the negative emotions are the lowest energy or vibration. So you have things like, you have absolute powerlessness at the very bottom, like absolute victimhood, where you're just completely numb, you don't feel anything, you don't have any power or anything, like you're just like, you feel nothing, you feel numb, you feel insignificant, that kind of thing. Powerlessness is at the very, very beginning, and it goes up to like, you know, revenge and anger, and then to like, you know, higher up things. I can't think of them at the top of my head at the moment, but then you get to your positive emotions, so like, you know, curiosity, joy, and you go all the way to like love, and you know, and things like that. So that is how our emotions exist, basically. And the way that you learn to interpret them accurately, as opposed to just like these random things that just happen, like these discrete things, like, oh, so the way you interpret it, as opposed to like, you know, just I'm angry, I'm happy, okay, whatever, cool, you know, like, is you basically, you take the emotion and you basically discern whether it's a positive or negative vibration, emotion. And so a positive emotion, really, like I'm giving like, it's subjective in subjective terms. Yeah, a positive emotion feels good, and a negative emotion generally feels bad. So when you feel positive emotion, it means that you're doing something that is aligning you to your joy. It sounds kind of like a bit, okay, and so, like, yeah, you just kind of stated the obvious. But how I mentioned in the previous part, the previous entry, is about how we do not know whether or not we are doing something right, essentially. when we are in until we have that energetic boost. Then we can look back and be like, okay, I guess, you know, at the time I thought I was doing the right thing, but now that I have this new perspective and like this new kind of energetic knowledge, like I had that kind of experience, then I know that what I was doing was perhaps, you know, not the best thing for me. But now I know better, right? Essentially, like your emotions work in that they, you know, the thing is like, before we like we have all of this awareness within us, like subconsciously, and becoming sensitive to that means that we basically become conscious of those things, right? And so what I'm saying here is that basically we already know what we need to do to be happy, or like we already know what we want. Essentially, a lot of people would argue against that, but no, you actually know what you want. It might be subconscious, but you know what you want. And so your subconscious mind, essentially, that's another way of calling, like, you know, your energetic feeling center. Your subconscious mind knows already what you want, but you like, you're not aware of it consciously. But like, you know, you'll do like yeah, you know, I don't really have to explain this. You'll do things subconsciously, and then like when you try and rationalize it, you're like, what the fuck, why did I try and do that? Particularly if you have kind of like conflicting like kind of like mental images of like what you want, like what you think you want, and it's kind of conflicting against what you truly want subconsciously, like in your heart. But basically, so positive emotion, when you experience that, it means that you are satisfying the need or the desire that your subconscious is basically putting forth. That's how you know that you're aligning with what you want. And then conversely, negative emotion is what you feel when you're basically aligning with when you're aligning with something that you don't want, or like when you're getting further. That's a better way of explaining it. When you're getting further away from what you subconsciously want. And so this is how your emotions, this is how you interpret your emotions. And there's something that I really want to get into, but I'm not going to get into it in this entry, but it's basically like, what, like how do, I mean, like, what is this energy thing? Like, essentially, you know, how does it basically stack up against, like, you know, our logic, essentially? Like, there's a key principle that I want to get into, but for now, I'm just going to say that your emotions, yeah, ultimately your emotions exist to show you what you to show you what you want. So in that sense, we should start to trust in our sensitivity, because ultimately, when we become more sensitive, not only does it make us more effective in certain ways, but it also shows us what we want more, what we really want, you know, and not just what we think we want. So those are two benefits, right? You get better at certain things, like, you know, connecting with people, dealing with, like, yeah, you know, complex emotional stuff, and also you get to know what you want truly deep down. And there's one more point that I wanted to say that's like on the tip of my tongue. Again, you know, I'm in kind of a weird headspace today, but I'm trying my best. Emotions exist on a scale. And they guide us. Could this be one of my infamous, like, just scatterbrainedness? Usually when I talk to myself, I'm usually very scatterbrained, so that's one thing I kind of had to release fear of as I launch into these kind of unprepared, you know, like unscripted log entries. But I shall leave it here, I think, because I can't remember it. But it will tie into this principle that I just mentioned about energy, as I do it in a future vlog entry. But anyway, I'm gonna end this one here. You know, learn to see your emotions in a different way. Your emotions are they're not just flukes, right? I want to get it into your heads that your emotions, they are a very, not really complex. They're kind of quite crude, I guess, in a way, like, because they're kind of messy, which is like a general thing with like sensitivity in general. But yeah, you know, they might be messy, and they might not make sense a lot of the time, like if you're not kind of very savvy, emotionally savvy. But you know, learn to listen to them and learn to interpret them. Learn to basically see what they're saying to you, instead of just like, you know, trying to make them go away, or like to try and experience more of them just because you want to get a high out of it. You know, learn to interpret what your emotions are telling you, because they're telling you, you know, non-verbally, they're telling you intuitively what you truly want inside. Right? That's why people say follow your heart, you know. That's why people say follow your passion, follow your heart, like follow your joy. It's because they understand that your joy is positive emotion, which means that like you're going in the direction of what you truly want. Right? And you know, would you rather, like, you know, just like, okay, fuck you, like, emotions, I'm not gonna listen to you, and then end up like doing what you thought was gonna make you happy, and then getting there and being like, fuck, this doesn't actually make me happy, and you're sitting on your deathbed? How often does that happen, I wonder? Yeah, cool. So, you know, respect your emotions, listen to them, give space for them. And I'm going to say a lot more about this, because emotions, like, this is kind of my central message, because there's lots of people talking about how to improve your life and stuff like that, and I think emotional intelligence is a very important aspect of that. So anyway, I'm going to cut this one here, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye!